Alright, finishing up, really. I promise. Maybe. Yeah, hopefully. 13 minutes. I think we can do it.
Detailing the manner in which you do so, and making it concrete so it can be scrutinized in specific
Well, look, I've made these effortless videos. They're 15 minutes long. Go play one of those and argue something. Do it. I mean, this is just stupid. You say you're making an argument. You're not making an argument. I'm sorry. I don't know how many videos this is in. Like, what are we, 10 videos deep in here? And the simple argument being made is that harm is different than not having cupcakes. And even this has to be some sort of argument? No, I'm sorry. Argument over.
its features specifically analysed to see if it is a reasonable proposition that we adopt this analogy as a concrete embodiment of reality.
Well, whatever. Like I said, it seems a simple enough question, right? Okay, you think you're going to say something to me that's going to make the game metaphor not apply to the 4 billion years of evolution on planet Earth. The game played inside the hierarchy of the human species. I mean, you can go to look at every single animal species and you can see the games within a game that's being played for all of them. The hierarchies, the contest. Do you know what the word contest means? There's contest. Animals have to take a test to survive. That's what's taking place here on Earth. You don't understand that? I have no help for you.
You patronize continually with this.
You know, you're the patronizing asshole. Again, even an argument is a test of sorts, okay? Now, over time, the little happy theory of a little, I don't know, a sadistic god, actually. A god who basically punishes all women for the crimes Eve committed. They somehow think that's really cool and have adopted that. Billions of people. Now it's only down to 1 billion, let's say. And another nutty billion have accepted Mohammed's theory of child molestation. And then you got another billion that do some sort of wacky Gaia Hindu-y thing or something. And then the atheists are just a bunch of selfish cunts who say, I can just make up my own values, and if I want to rape a woman tonight, it's okay as long as I don't get caught. There's no moral taboo against it. It's just some sort of social convention that says rape is wrong. And if I want to rape, it's okay for me to rape. If I think it's fun, it's fun. Yeah, and so in the atmosphere where people are convinced by theories this ludicrous, I'm making an argument. And obviously, I'm not winning in the broad sense of that word. I'm winning little victories. But yeah, I'm not winning in a big way. Why? Oh, obviously there's nothing insane in my philosophy, and you need something insane in it. Because most people are insane. It's there. You understand that?
Fun is not the same as having fun. Yeah, duh. Yeah?
Oh, now you say, yeah, duh. It's a fundamental premise, asshole. It's the basic structure of the asymmetry argument that you've been using Benatar's name on, and you now just say duh to it? It's the premise of his argument. Shit for brains. Is that your delusion of accomplishment, your silly notions of accomplishment are just that, silly notions, and that the harm is substantial. You will give up nothing by not existing. You'll give up silly notions in exchange for absolute horror and terror and suffering. And that is rational. That's his argument, fuck for brains, and now you say duh to it. Amazing.
But this dissimilarity, okay, are they so dissimilar that they can't be compared?
Are they so dissimilar that they can't be compared? So, the absence of a cupcake shall now be compared to chemotherapy. Or, concentration camp. Yeah, why? What would be the point of the comparison? Oh, that's right. It wouldn't have any point at all. It'd be silly.
Because this is the nature of the Benatar argument, is that you're, and much of ethics is about comparing things, okay? And like the negative utilitarian who wishes to somehow, where the utilitarian is happy with one scale of bad and good, and that things can be.
Well, again, the Benatar argument doesn't need any scale, because it's just basically pointing out that there's a guarantee, fail-safe solution in the non-existence. You give up nothing of real value, just a notion, a Venetian notion, and you spare yourself untold, uncalculable horror, terror, and torture. Oh, comparison over.
Contrasted, wishes to detach all the negative things onto a separate scale and elevate them by his aspersions to a higher, more important level, without necessarily qualifying that. But there's that.
Well, whatever. It has been qualified over and over and over again. Again, that's what Benatar's book does that you don't want to read. Most of his book isn't about the asymmetry math per se. It's about the optimism bias, the fear of failure, the other psychological phenomenon that make it difficult for human beings to fairly analyze the poor performance of the biological organism. They don't want to admit they're part of a bad game. They don't want to admit they're a shitty player. They don't want to admit the truth about the nature of what they're involved in. That's the argument in Benatar's book, is explaining why people's psychology make it impossible for them to realize a very simple philosophy, a very simple philosophical conclusion that if that fail-safe is the only rational choice.
As in performing the analysis, the evaluation, the comparison, if you like, you have to between two dissimilar things.
Right, you can do that all day, and I've done it in videos. The comparisons are often made. I could show you a baby elephant being eaten alive by lions, and then I could show you the happy lion sitting on the side of a pond with a big fat belly burping, and I could say, well, is that really worth it? I could show you 9 dead lion cubs of different ages from, birth to 1 year old, and I could show you one living lion, one mature lion, and I could say, is this worth it, this attrition number? So we can go through these calculations all over planet Earth. I can show you starving people on planet Earth. I can show you kids with diseases they shouldn't have that could be prevented for 50 fucking cents. And then I could show you assholes cheering at the Olympics. I can do all sorts of those comparisons and point out that everything that we find valuable is either preposterously redundant, like looking at the sunset, or wetting your pants over a rainbow, or it's trivial, superficial, addictive, heroin-ish crap. It's junk. It's junk food you're chasing, and you're doing it by running over the real value, which is the sentient creatures you're abusing to get to your junk food.
You have to describe and justify in a consistent way now, because what is a mathematical function, what is a mapping of valuations from one set of abstract objects to another set.
Well, again, that's done in two different ways. The first argument is the asymmetry argument that just basically spells out that, yes, it is just projections of value in terms of our Maseratis are cool. Well, Maseratis aren't cool intrinsically. They aren't valuable intrinsically. They're only valuable as projections in people's heads. Where the value of the kid getting cancer is not a projection in your head. It's actually a kid having cancer and being very sick and very, very, very miserable. That the animal in the slaughterhouse versus the Maserati, the, whatever you want to compare it to, that the real value is in the sentient creatures who are paying for these projected values that you think are meritorious. The argument being made is that everything you can mention as a human ambition that isn't related to fixing harm in the world, like feeding starving people, is not a real good. That is in fact a trivial, superficial projection of value that has no real value whatsoever. It's just because you want it, you need it. There we have the unneeded need. That need, if lost, is of no value. We don't recognize it as being valuable when the Martians don't have it, and the Venetians don't have it, and the Saturnites don't have it, and the Moonicans don't have it, and the Mercuryites don't have it. None of those non-existent civilizations have lost anything by being non-existent. And the same is true for Earthlings. Your projections of value in your Maseratis and your silly accomplishments and your deeds of daring do is of absolute no value. And therefore it should be properly disposed of to rescue all the things you will torture.
Of abstract objects, that being the numbers, and these are philosophical, argumentative difficulties that you face, and you can either just tell me again that I'm stupid, that
you're stupid.
It's clear harm is not.
Yeah, it's obvious. Yes, that's right. There's an obvious distinction between projected value and actual value. You're obsessed with projections of value. I'm obsessed with actual value. That is correct. You're an idiot. I'm not.
Not the same as having fun, efficiency, consumption, reproduction, and you can.
Yeah, you can mock it all you want, but you're not arguing how it's not the truth. We're biological organisms. We're caught up in a gladiator war. The victory, sticking your flag on top of the pile of corpses, is actually not a victory. It is the definition of failure. Being king of a pile of corpses is the definition of failure, not victory. You are an idiot.
Make another 3,000 videos, but unless you deal with these philosophical difficulties that your position has,
I don't have to deal with them by your standards, asshole. I just have to deal with them by a reasonable person's standards, okay? And I'm saying over time, this argument is only going to get stronger and stronger, and your silly, my projected values have value argument is going to get weaker and weaker. People are going to realize that, oh yeah, we've only looked at a zillion rainbows before. Rainbows really aren't. It's just completely a psychological phenomenon that we find something soothing in looking at 4 colors in little bands in a rainbow. Yeah, it's not a very sophisticated thing to get all gooey about. Yeah, it's not highly rational. It's highly irrational.
And it's not beyond bounds that they're not. I'm not saying they're insurmountable, but the obligation is that you surmount them. And and
like I said, I don't mind that obligation. I'm free to take on that obligation, and we'll see what time will tell. Right, asshole? I'm saying I don't have any real hope of convincing people with a 60 IQ or obnoxious bigots like you, okay? So yeah, you live in your denial and pretend that your fantasies of your spectacularness actually mean something. Go ahead, lie to yourself all you want, all right? I'll concede the loss. I'm not going to convince egomaniacal lunatics like yourself. It's okay with me.
Your critic, I'm saying you've not dealt with these difficulties.
Yeah, well, again, I can't. There's no way to deal with the difficulty of some religious kook who wishes to believe nonsense. there's only so much you can do. You can say, look, here's the evidence. Here's a dinosaur bone. I mean, all you can do is say, look, it's a fable, it's a story, it's 2,000 years old. Don't you realize that? It's a stupid story. People can't even, two witnesses could watch something happening right out on my sidewalk. Well, there's no sidewalk, but right on the road here. And 10 minutes later, they're going to have different stories about what happened. And you're trusting a 2,000-year-old fable? I mean, grow the fuck up.
And I'm saying that you can't profess to be being logical and that these conclusions are logical when you actually don't even understand what an argument is.
Yeah, that's another one of your accusations, okay? So I don't think you understand what words mean. I don't think you have any conception of how consciousness works. I don't think you have any character or intellectual honesty. I think you're intellectually dishonest. I think you're absolutely full of shit here. You're in a desperate mode where you have to defend your life and you don't like it. So too bad. You suck. It's a fact, and you don't like it. Okay, too bad.
And that premises are how they function within an argument, and you don't understand that when you attach values to things, you're attaching numbers to things, and that this means you're mapping values to numbers, and you have to do this in a consistent way.
No, I don't. All I do, I've pointed out before, is all I have to care about is the extremes, okay? So you name me your best pleasure, and I'll name you the worst misery, and I'll make the argument that your best pleasure isn't worth imposing the worst misery on a victim you never got consent from. So I'm not going to have a problem once we get to the imposition argument, but even without the imposition argument, again, I'm going to be able to explain how your perceived value is an addiction. You only need it because of your ego problem and the hunger built into your biology. It only has value to you because you've been made to be hungry for it. All right, and that the pain you're imposing to produce your life is not yours to take. It's just not. I mean, we're back to the imposition argument, but it's more directly related to just the imposition of the facts of the game. You can't exist in the game without much of the game players having to exist to create the environment with which you exist in. Your oxygen, you're dependent on the biosphere to create your environment. And you have no right to enslave them to your delusions of grandeur. And they are just delusions of grandeur.
It's consistent. That doesn't contain a logical error in the functional specification of how you move from a value to a number.
Well, again, I'm just going to clarify. I would like, if somebody wants to do it and itemize everything, but I'm just saying relative comparisons certainly can be made. And we certainly can make, with the broadest brush, everybody would agree that a shiny penny is not worth, sticking a knife in a kid's eye. We can make simple value equation, and we can understand them in the extreme cases, and that's all we need to understand to do the math.
Anyhow, moving on.
Anyway, let's have it. I'll just play it and then
I'll be back.
Alright, this is really kind of brief. So I just made the point that, again, that not having fun is not bad, and harm is bad.
It's a shame that Inmendham actually thinks he's making an argument in all of this, really. That he's just making...
Yeah, he's basically saying that all your pleasures are worth absolutely nothing because you only need them. You must have the need first. The absence of their existence, the absence of the existence of the Mona Lisa or anything, the David, any of that crap, the absence of it in the universe would mean nothing if humans didn't exist. Right? All the Venetian art, all the Martian art is worthless. Right? Because there's no Martians to say it's important. The only thing that could want a Martian to exist is a Martian. And you're just being an egocentric, humanistic bigot in thinking somehow humans are important, or more generally, Earthlings are important. And they're not. And nothing they have created is important, are useful, are functional, are valuable. But the victims they are creating are real, the harm is real, and it's an obscene price to pay for useless crap. You're not on a rescue mission. You're not doing something of greater value than the things you're harming. Fuckhead.
These trivial, bland, simple-minded statements and jumping to wild conclusions, and is unable to articulate how from these statements he reaches the conclusions he does. And moreover, not so much as he states that he reaches these conclusions from these statements.
So you get this, right? Just accusations, no facts, no evidence, no argument. He hasn't defended evolution. He hasn't defended the fact that it's precious commodities and they're controlled by crude forces. He hasn't explained how there's anything other than crude forces. He hasn't explained anything about any character in our desire or any character in the things we do desire. He hasn't done any of that. He just keeps talking out of his ass and saying absolutely nothing. There's just a bunch of methane flying out at me, and I am being quite mature in reacting as civilly as I am.
But he doesn't understand the philosophical work that needs to be done, the issues that needed to be addressed, the complexities that need to be addressed in getting at the depth of the questions. He doesn't understand.
Whatever, the depth of the question. So again, you're going to keep saying you're doing something of redeeming value. Sunsets. Petted the dog. And that's a legitimate excuse for those little moments, or those little precious moments of joy. You will torture the biosphere. You suck. Yeah, that's pretty easy.
And that, well, he just doesn't understand his own position. He doesn't understand how these statements lead his mind to these conclusions, and he doesn't understand the objections that say that these statements can never lead to those conclusions.
The objections that those statements can never lead to those conclusions, and yet he has not provided any evidence of these objections beyond what? What objection do you have? The undead God? Do you believe in an undead God also? Zombie gods? Zombie purpose? What's your redeeming function for the human race? Again, if it doesn't have any purpose, all there is pieces on the board. So if there's no players in the game, there's no two people across each other on the chessboard, so there's no function, there's just pieces knocking each other off the board to say I win and then lose tomorrow.
This is why, in a sense, it's difficult to articulate the problems with Inmendham's argument, because there is kind of no argument. Okay, there's no entailment of concepts that lead.
Well, it's again just more accusations. Okay, just keep saying that. I can just say you suck, you smell, you're you're vacuous. You're everything in this video is vacuous. It's vacuous. It's empty of substance. There is no substance to this commentary whatsoever. I've explained how your delusions of grandeur, I've used the term delusion of grandeur. I've explained how your projections of value have no relevance in a conversation about the actual value of a suffering sentient being. Now, those are explicit statements in defense of the argument that you are living a lie, asshole. You are a biological bug created on planet Earth. You have no intrinsic value or intrinsic function. Okay, you're basically just a dupe, a puppet, living out a stupid, silly life. Okay, and now through the mechanism of evolution, you've been granted the grand benefit of being able to climb out of the game, climb out of the maze, and see the carnage, and you're sitting there saying, rah, rah. Fuck you.
From general ideas to a specific concrete conclusion. You know, is this statement, not having fun is not a bad thing if you don't need to have fun. Well, as I've earlier detailed, the key
Liar. You detail nothing. Well, let's see.
thing to see here is again this angst of the not needing element. Somehow the lack of need, the lack of purpose is instrumental to...
Right, okay, so that makes sense to you, right? That somehow necessity shouldn't have some correlation to value. That things that are unnecessary versus things that are necessary to some other purpose, that shouldn't have some effect on your perception of value. If I don't need to go to the mall, I have no need to get there. I therefore wouldn't need a car, right? So see, it has an implication, correct? So that's the argument here. Necessity is fundamental to value, to purpose, to function, to use, to utility, to efficiency. There's no efficiency if there's no need. I hit the button.
Inmendham's argument, yet it has no basis for being instrumental in the valuation of things. And at least Inmendham is incapable of articulating how and why the lack of need should bear on the case of the valuation of...
Yeah, well, the very word necessity, has to do with the fact that somehow it's important or urgent or vital to some sort of function. So there's necessary parts, and then there's unnecessary parts, or superfluous parts, or redundant parts. It's necessary for the heart to beat, for your biology to stay alive. These are necessities. These are preconditions that must exist. The precondition to efficiency is your capacity to create something of value to justify the value lost in the consumption that is suffering. I mean, really not complicated.
Fun and bad things happening. This statement, not having fun is not a bad thing if you don't need to have fun. It is clearly the entailment. It's entailment by
consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, addiction.
Okay.
Right? Cannibalism, addiction. Addiction. You don't understand the concept of addiction? Come on.
He makes the words escape. I hate it when this happens. The conditional antecedent. It's not the word I'm looking for. Yeah, we'll go. He attaches this conditional to his statement that not having fun is not a bad thing. Well,
He attaches this conditional to his statement that not having fun is not a bad thing. Right. Okay. Well. All right. Let's see what his well is.
Can I object to that statement? What I'm objecting to is where he goes with it and how he goes with it, the numbers he attaches, and the justification for attaching numbers to this thing. And he goes on and says, harm is about...
Okay, now, in the context of arguing the Benatar asymmetry, so recognize again, all these videos were labeled with Benatar's name, or the word asymmetry. He's arguing the asymmetry. It's a fundamental premise of the asymmetry that basically the lost value of your contentment, if you didn't exist, is minuscule compared to the gained value of the prevented harm. It's the fundamental premise of the argument, that your projections of value, the value of the Maserati, is actually zero, that you contrive that as a process of your psychology, and that the value of the harmed animals and people is real, and that you gain huge profit from preventing the huge losses.
That thing, harm is where the bad happens. Is this the philosophical depths of Inmendham? I think it is, unfortunately. And it's very super...
Well, anyway, this coming from an asshole who doesn't think preventing harm is a good. So, if somebody's going to get mocked, you're the one who's going to get mocked.
Official. The problem is, as I've already detailed, is the assignment of values to these statements in a consistent fashion and in an objective fashion without working towards your own clearly defined goals.
What is that? Does that mean something to you? Talking about these values without your defined goals, whatever. There's no goals. The goal is efficiency. There's no good game to play. The only game to play is minimize losses. It's not complicated. Oh, it's me again.
This is the example of the human.
I presume he'll start.
I mean, you really can't run short of examples of everything that's alluded to by myself and the Dead God Guy and Snake Plisskenus and Pyro.
Oh, you bring up Snake Plisskenus and Pyro? I mean, Pyro's... Pyro... I don't even know how to put him in a category. But, yeah, I don't know if you really want him on your side. But whatever. Look, the Dead God Guy, like you, is a bigot against animals, which is a non-starter for me. And secondly, I mean, he's got some kind of dead god theory. He's a kook.
Oh, and anybody else who criticises Inmendham. This thick-laden metaphorical speak, you know, is the essence of the psychobabble, pseudo-science, pseudo-mathematical...
Mommy, can we go see a rainbow? I mean, that's all you're doing. You're like a fucking infant, okay, who wants its rattle and its fluffy toy. And, you know, and you're going to sit there and talk about somebody else, the character of somebody else's thought process? You're giving this no rational thought. You're projecting all over the place, buddy.
Philosophical illiteracy.
Yeah, well, philosophical illiteracy by these people's standards means you don't know what, you can't hear Gaia's heartbeat. Yeah, right.
Of Inmendham. I think the worst, most blatant flaw I could say is as I've already said, is this, how he can so easily say things like, oh yeah, I think a fairly fundamental principle is we have to be fair, and be completely blind to the hours and hours of debate that we could have about all the facets of fairness. As I said, as, you know.
Well, again, do you really think there's all these facets to fairness? I mean, really, isn't the objective of fairness is just to identify unfairness? I mean, isn't unfairness usually very easily identified? I mean, you know, one guy's standing here, and the other guy's standing way out there. You know, one guy's 500 pounds, you know, carrying extra weight, and the other guy isn't. I mean, you know, in horse racing, they put weights in the saddle, you know, to even up everything. You know, they try to make it fair. I mean, we know what fairness is. We can identify unfairness, so let's not pretend this is that complicated.
Or whether it's correct to have a meritocracy or not.
Well, again, I don't even know what this meritocracy thing, I haven't made any, I've never used the word. I don't know what the implications of it is. Do you mean that I think people who work should get paid for working? Yeah, I do. It's probably going to be my next video. I'll respond. The Modern Mystic posed a question that's sort of interesting and I think might be worth exploring. But anyway, so we're almost done.
So, I think I'll call that a day. It seems I might be mistaken in presuming he was rambling on for an extra 20 minutes solely about myself, but he doesn't add much to what is his usual 3,000 videos plus.
All right. Well, you know, I'd like to make a bet with you, but I bet you some of these quotes I make will be written in marble somewhere in the dust. You know, I mean, fuck you. It was really quite an excellent video. This video that he played pieces of was from. So yeah, fuck you. You're an idiot.
Amount to. And yet he has the audacity to accuse others of lacking points and depth and quality, and you know, so many of his videos are, well, I've gone through all this before, but well, I'll go through it again.
Yeah, and how is that an evidence of my failure? I think that's evidence of your failure. Again, it took you 5 videos to figure out that Benatar's asymmetry was comparing humans existing and humans not existing. Idiot.
Okay, I'll call that a day.
Alright, so we're done. Hey, this movie's over. And this one's almost over. Anyway. I do like visuals. I've gotten attached to it. Like things happening. So anyway. The summation, there's really no summation, right? I mean, it's just it's a very unfortunate fact that, you know, once things degrade, you just get into some semi-ponage war thing, and that's all that's here. I think I have continually made my arguments, defending my arguments. I think my arguments based in a rational, clinical view of the dynamics of evolution, the consequences of material evolution in this universe, and that these fundamental mechanisms are just fruitless. They can't produce anything. They can't clean up anything until they make the mess. You can't make the need, and you know, until you make the needer. It's just not a system that could ever run a profit. And we're foolish not to recognize that intractable fact, and through only a desperate addiction to our own ego perceptions of of exaggerated, egotistical perceptions of accomplishment do we perpetuate harm. And that is tragic. You are tragically assholes.